The cold silence of space was deceptive. To the untrained eye, the vastness of the void seemed peaceful, serene even. But to those who understood the true nature of the cosmos, space was a battlefield. A place where empires clashed, where civilizations met their end in the span of a single engagement. The Galactic Dominion knew this all too well. They had ruled over the stars for millennia, forging their empire through fire and conquest. Their fleet was a force of nature, a hammer of war that had crushed hundreds of species beneath its relentless march. Their war doctrines were simple: overwhelm, subjugate, and erase any resistance. No civilization had ever withstood their might. Not for long. So when an unknown warship appeared at the outer edges of Dominion-controlled space, no alarms were raised. The ship was small by Dominion standards, dwarfed by their dreadnoughts, cruisers, and battleships. It had no fleet escort, no supporting armada, just one vessel against an entire battle group. A foolish display of defiance, or so they thought. The bridge of the Dominion flagship hummed with activity. Officers moved efficiently, their expressions bored rather than alarmed. The ship's scanners had already analyzed the human warship's hull composition, weapon placements, and energy output. The results were unimpressive. Primitive technology, one officer scoffed, scanning the data feed. Their hull plating is dense, but their energy readings are below Dominion war standards. No match for our capital ships. Then they must be suicidal, another officer mused. One ship against a Dominion fleet? This will be over in minutes. At the center of the command deck, Admiral Sivar reclined in his chair, eyes narrowed at the lone vessel displayed on the main view screen. He was a veteran of over 100 battles, a conqueror whose name was whispered in fear across dozens of star systems. Yet, as he studied the human warship, something gnawed at the edges of his mind. Something was off. The humans had only recently joined the galactic community. Their homeworld, Earth, was unremarkable, a small, temperate planet orbiting a yellow dwarf star. Their history was turbulent, filled with wars among their own kind. Their technology was advanced for a pre-spacefaring species, but nothing compared to the Dominion's 1,000-year technological lead. And yet, here they were, alone, in hostile space, facing an armada that had subjugated entire star systems. No distress signal, no attempts to flee. Why? Sivar leaned forward. "Open a channel," he commanded. The communications officer obeyed, linking to the human vessel. A moment of silence passed before a reply came through. The voice was calm, unshaken. "This is Commander Hayes of the HSS Vengeance. Dominion Fleet, you are trespassing in restricted space. You have 10 seconds to withdraw." Laughter erupted across the Dominion bridge. Sivar chuckled, shaking his head. "They threaten us. With one ship," the officers sneered, their arrogance palpable. "Shall we respond, Admiral?" Sivar smirked. "No need. We'll answer them with fire." The order was given. A dozen Dominion warships locked onto the human vessel, their forward cannons charging. The first volley was unleashed, searing energy blasts powerful enough to rip through planetary crusts. And then, something impossible happened. The human ship did not move. It made no attempt to evade, no desperate maneuvers, no frantic attempts to escape. Instead, the energy blasts, enough to vaporize entire space stations, vanished on impact. A shimmering field surrounded the human warship, absorbing the attacks as if they were nothing more than raindrops on steel. The energy lances, designed to obliterate war fleets, dissipated harmlessly into the void. The bridge of the Dominion flagship fell silent. Sivar's smirk vanished. What was that? The sensor officer's hands trembled over the console. "Our weapons had no effect," he stammered. "Their shields absorbed everything." "Impossible," Sivar growled. "No technology can neutralize our firepower." And yet, the proof was right before them. Then, the human warship moved. The Dominion had expected lumbering sublight drives, slow reaction times, a sluggish warship struggling against their superior fleet. They were wrong. The human vessel blurred. One moment it was in their crosshairs. The next, it was gone. Sensors struggled to track its position. It reappeared behind the Dominion formation in an instant, as if space itself had bent to its will. Sivar's eyes widened. Hyperlight jump. No. No ship can maneuver like that within a gravity well. Panic spread through the Dominion fleet. Targeting systems scrambled to adjust, but the human ship was already on the move. And then, with surgical precision, it struck. Single beam of energy lanced out from the human vessel. Thin, almost unimpressive compared to the Dominion's massive plasma cannons. Yet, when it hit the first Dominion warship, the battlecruiser exploded instantly. No slow damage buildup, no warning, just obliteration. The shockwave rippled through the formation. The crew of the Dominion flagship watched in horror as their sister ship, one of the most heavily armored vessels in their fleet, was cut in half like butter. The front section disintegrated. The rear drifted lifelessly. One shot, an officer whispered. They destroyed a battlecruiser with one shot. Sivar's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. All ships, concentrate fire. I want that ship destroyed. But the human warship was already gone again. It danced through the Dominion formation, weaving through the chaos like a predator among prey. Every time it fired, a Dominion ship ceased to exist. It did not waste ammunition. Every shot was precise. Every maneuver was calculated. This wasn't a battle. This was a slaughter. Sivar's mind raced. This wasn't possible. No species had ever fought like this. Even the most advanced civilizations had never displayed this level of technological superiority. Then, a chilling realization crept into his thoughts. Had the Dominion underestimated humanity? Had they made a mistake? A fatal mistake, by assuming the humans were just another species to conquer? Because if this was just one ship, what kind of monsters were waiting back on their homeworld? Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. But the battle was far from over. The Dominion had numbers, firepower, and experience, but against an enemy like this, none of that might matter. A cold shiver crept through Admiral Zyvar's spine. He had seen countless battles, had orchestrated planetary sieges, and had even been responsible for the extinction of 3 species. But never had he encountered a warship that defied the very laws of combat. He gritted his teeth, watching the tactical display as the human vessel weaved through his fleet like a phantom. "We need data," he snapped. "Full spectral analysis. I want to know what that thing is made of." The sensor officers scrambled, their clawed fingers racing over control panels. Within seconds, streams of information filled the display. But what they found only deepened their terror. "The hull," one officer whispered. "It's not made of any known metal. Our scans can't penetrate it. It's like the ship is rejecting the scan itself." "What about its energy readings?" Zyvar demanded. The officer hesitated. "There are no fluctuations." Zyvar frowned. "That's impossible. Shields require energy. They should show power surges with every impact." "And yet, Admiral," the officer swallowed, "there's nothing. No spikes, no heat signatures. It's as if their defenses don't even need to compensate for our attacks." Zyvar clenched his fists. That was wrong. Even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy followed certain rules of warfare. Energy shielding required massive power sources. Faster than light movement within a gravity well was restricted by inertia. And yet, the humans weren't playing by those rules. That meant only one thing. "Admiral!" another officer cried. "They're charging weapons again." A bright glow formed at the front of the human warship. But this time, it wasn't a concentrated beam like before. Instead, it pulsed, sending out a sudden burst of light that rippled through the Dominion fleet. The effect was instantaneous. Every single Dominion warship lost power simultaneously. Yvar's breath hitched as the lights on his bridge flickered. The once bright tactical display turned black. Every system shut down at once. The engines, the weapons, the communications. Even the artificial gravity wavered. causing officers to momentarily float before emergency backups stabilized the environment. What just happened? Zivar roared. The engineering officer's mandibles clicked in panic. Admiral, we've lost all control. It's as if the ship's core has been disconnected from reality. Zivar's heart pounded. Restart the systems. We can't. The command relays aren't responding. The power is there, but the controls are locked out. Zivar turned to the view screen, his blood running cold. His fleet was dead in space, and the human warship, it was just sitting there, not attacking, not finishing them off, just waiting. Why? Then, the comms flickered back to life. A single message came through. The voice was calm, controlled. You are outgunned, outmatched, outmaneuvered. Surrender now. Zivar's hands clenched into trembling fists. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. The Dominion was the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. They didn't lose battles. They wiped out those who dared challenge them. But today, he wasn't fighting a desperate, inferior species. He was facing a force that had studied war, mastered it, and now they were demonstrating it. This is a trick, Zivar snarled. Some kind of psychological warfare. He slammed a fist onto the armrest of his command chair. We do not surrender to primitives. But deep down, he wasn't so sure they were primitives anymore. Then, for the first time in his life, Admiral Zivar felt fear. Admiral Zivar struggled to steady his breathing. His mind raced for an explanation. Any explanation for what had just happened. His fleet, his entire fleet, reduced to nothing but drifting metal. He had commanded planetary invasions, led orbital bombardments that turned civilizations to dust. But he had never been rendered so helpless. The human warship remained eerily still, its dark, angular hull absorbing the distant glow of a nearby star. There was no movement, no sign of aggression. Just that simple, chilling message repeating on the comms, you are outgunned, outmatched, outmaneuvered. Surrender now. Admiral, the communications officer whispered, her voice trembling. They're waiting for a response. Zivar's mandibles tightened. His officers, hardened warriors who had once mocked humanity as nothing more than an insignificant species, were visibly shaken. Some exchanged nervous glances. Others clung to their consoles as if that would somehow protect them. He had to act. Now. Override manual systems, Zivar barked. I don't care if it's brute force. Get our thrusters back online. His engineers worked frantically, but the ship remained unresponsive. The human attack had done more than disable their systems. It had cut them off from their own ships. Another officer spoke up, voice tinged with dread. Admiral, our fleet is deactivating. Zivar turned sharply. What do you mean, deactivating? The officer hesitated, then brought up a display. The Dominion warships were darkening, one by one. The once bright status indicators flickered and faded. Engines went completely cold. Weapons systems vanished from existence, as if erased from reality itself. It wasn't just an EMP. This was something else. Zivar's mind reeled. No known technology could cause something like this. Even the Dominion's own planet-killer-class dreadnoughts couldn't perform such an operation on a galactic scale. What are they doing to us? He murmured. Then, for the first time, the human ship moved. A single, deliberate action. No visible thrusters, no distortion waves from a gravity drive. It simply relocated. One moment it was kilometers away. The next, it was right in front of them. A perfect, silent glide through space. The bridge was so quiet that Zivar could hear his own heartbeat. Then the human ship transmitted another message. We could have destroyed you. A simple statement. Not a boast. Not a threat. A fact. And that was far worse, because it meant that every action the humans had taken, every maneuver, every strike, had been done by choice. They had allowed the Dominion fleet to survive this long. A creeping, horrifying realization settled over Zivar. The Dominion had assumed this warship was a prototype, a single masterpiece of engineering. But what if it wasn't? What if this was just a standard human warship? What if the humans had an entire fleet of them? He swallowed hard. If that were the case, Then everything the Dominion thought they knew about galactic supremacy had just crumbled to dust. Shivar forced himself to stand, pushing away the wave of unease threatening to overwhelm him. He was a Dominion admiral. A conqueror. He would not be intimidated. He turned to his officers. Prepare a reply, stall them. Buy us time to regain control of our ships. The comms officer hesitated, but nodded. A static-filled transmission was sent. This is Admiral Sivar of the Dominion Armada. Identify your ship and state your demands. A silence stretched between the two forces. Then, at last, the humans responded. The reply came in flawless Dominion standard, their pronunciation eerily precise. This is the HSV Revenant. Our demand is simple. Stand down. Shivar's jaw clenched. Human ships never entered Dominion-controlled space. They had been too cautious, too weak to challenge the galactic order. But this was not the behavior of a species that feared war. The name of their ship, Revenant, was not lost on him. A word that meant something that should have stayed dead, but didn't. The silence stretched on, thick with tension. Then, the human commander spoke again. You invaded our territory. You fired first. We retaliated. We did not come here looking for war, but we are prepared to end it. Zivar's hands curled into fists. He wanted to lash out, to deny it, to fight back, but he couldn't. Not like this. Not against an enemy that had already won before the battle even began. For the first time in Dominion history, a warship of the mighty Empire had been brought to its knees, and it was by humans. Admiral Zivar felt his throat tighten. The words of the human commander echoed in his mind. We did not come here looking for war, but we are prepared to end it. Every instinct in his body screamed for him to retaliate, to not show weakness. But as he stood on his bridge, staring at the lifeless husks of his once mighty fleet, he knew the truth. They had already lost. His officers were frozen, their faces locked in grim realization. Warriors who had fought for Dominion supremacy, who had stood on the ashes of conquered worlds, were now reduced to helpless bystanders. The enemy had disabled them without a single casualty. And that was the terrifying part. Humans had always been dismissed as an insignificant species, a minor annoyance in the grand cosmic order. Their planets were few, their empire young. Their technology was crude compared to the Dominion's millennia-old war machines. But now, all of those assumptions had collapsed in an instant. The HSV Revenant wasn't just a warship. It was something else. Something beyond the Dominion's understanding. The silent dread on the bridge was shattered by an urgent transmission. The comms officer, still visibly shaken, turned to Zivar. Admiral? It's from Central Command. Zivar stiffened. The Dominion. High Council. The supreme rulers of their empire. The ones who had ordered this invasion, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Put it through, Zivar ordered. The holographic display flickered, and an imposing figure materialized. High Chancellor Ruvok, the most powerful leader in the Dominion. His 4 burning eyes glared down, his deep voice like distant thunder. Admiral, Zivar, report! For a fleeting moment, Zivar considered lying, telling the Chancellor that the battle had simply been an unforeseen setback, that reinforcements were on the way, that victory was still within their grasp. But what reinforcements? Even if the Dominion sent 1,000 more warships, what difference would it make? The Revenant had disabled his fleet in seconds. It had moved in ways that defied physics. It had rewritten the rules of space combat. There was only one truth. Zivar took a deep breath. He had to tell them. Chancellor, he began, voice heavy with reluctant admission. The Dominion Armada has been neutralized. Our fleet is... He hesitated. No longer operational. A stunned silence. Then the Chancellor's expression twisted in rage. Neutralized. Explain yourself, Admiral. Zivar clenched his fists. We engaged the human warship. We had the numbers, the firepower, but they disabled us before we could even fire a second volley. The Chancellor's mandibles clicked in frustration. Are you telling me that one human warship defeated an entire Dominion battle group? Zivar swallowed hard. Yes. Another silence. The bridge crew avoided his gaze, waiting for the Chancellor's response. Then, finally, he spoke. "This is unacceptable. You will destroy that ship, Admiral. The Dominion does not suffer humiliation." Zivar barely contained his frustration. "With what weapons, Chancellor? We have nothing. Our systems are disabled, our weapons are offline, and—" He paused. His blood ran cold. A second human warship had appeared, sleek, dark, and utterly silent, just like the Revenant. It hadn't arrived with a flash of hyperspace exit. It hadn't registered on their sensors. It was simply there. Zivar turned to his officers. "Where did it come from?" One of them stammered, trying to work the scanners. It wasn't here. Before! It just appeared!" Zivar's heart pounded. "How many more were there?" The comms officer gasped. "Another one just arrived!" Then another, and another. The Dominion bridge crew watched in horror as more and more human ships appeared, materializing. Out of nowhere. 5, 10, 20. Each one moving with the same eerie precision. Not a single wasted movement. Not a single signal broadcast. They were ghosts, and they had surrounded the once mighty Dominion fleet like predators circling prey. The Chancellor's voice crackled through the comms, laced with rare uncertainty. "What is happening?" Zivar had no answer. The humans weren't boasting about their superiority. They weren't gloating about their victory. They were simply demonstrating it. Zivar felt the weight of an entire empire crumbling in that moment. For centuries, the Dominion had seen itself as the pinnacle of galactic power. The ultimate conquerors. The ones who dictated the fate of lesser species. Now, they were the ones being hunted. The human commander spoke again, his voice calm and deliberate. "Your empire assumed it ruled the stars. That assumption was incorrect. Zivar had always believed humans were fragile, weak. But in this moment, he saw the truth. They weren't weak. They had been patient. For years, they had hidden their true power. Let the Dominion believe them to be insignificant. And now, when the moment was right, they had revealed themselves. And it was far, far too late to stop them. Shivar turned back to the Chancellor's flickering hologram. "What are your orders?" A rare thing happened then. For the first time in Dominion history, a High Chancellor hesitated. And Zivar realized that he didn't know what to say. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Admiral Zivar could hear the shallow breathing of his officers, their nerves fraying under the weight of what they were witnessing. 20 human warships. 20 ghostly leviathans, surrounding the shattered remnants of the Dominion armada like predators toying with dying prey. It defied everything the Dominion knew about human capabilities. Their intelligence reports had always been clear. Humans had only a few advanced warships, their military was limited, and their technological progress was inferior to the Dominion's centuries-old advancements. Yet here they were, silent, motionless, utterly in control. Shivar had served in the Dominion fleet for over 60 years. He had led planetary invasions, crushed insurrections, commanded entire armadas in campaigns of conquest. He had never felt helpless. Until now. His mandibles tightened as he turned back toward the holographic figure of Chancellor Ruvak. The supreme ruler of the Dominion, normally a figure of unshakable authority, looked like he had been struck by lightning. His 4 burning eyes darted between the human warships, his expression a mixture of disbelief and something Zivar had never seen on the Chancellor's face before. Fear. "Admiral," Ruvak's voice was strained, as if he were forcing himself to speak. "I want an immediate analysis. What technology are they using? How are they concealing their fleet? Where did these warships come from?" Zivar clenched his fists. "We don't know!" A sharp crack echoed across the bridge as the Chancellor slammed a fist against his console. "Find out!" he bellowed. "I refuse to believe that an empire as young as humanity has developed technology beyond our comprehension." Zivar wished he had an answer. But the truth was, the humans had. The comms officer turned, his scales pale with dread. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet. It's not just audio this time. It's a visual feed." Zivar felt his stomach sink. A visual feed meant one thing. The humans wanted them to see something. "Patch it through," he ordered. The massive central view screen flickered, distorting for a moment before revealing an image that sent a wave of horror through the Dominion bridge crew. It was the interior of a human warship. The HSV Revenant dark corridors. Red emergency lighting casting long, ominous shadows. But it was what stood at the center of the image that made Zivar's blood turn to ice. A single Dominion prisoner. A viceroy. A high-ranking member of the Dominion nobility. One of the overseers responsible for managing conquered worlds. His once pristine battle robes were torn and stained, his forearms bound by thick metal restraints. He was on his knees, gasping for breath, and behind him stood a human, a soldier, clad in advanced battle armor, black as the void, with a helmet that revealed nothing. The human gripped a weapon unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. It was small, barely the length of a forearm, but Zivar knew without a doubt that whatever it was, it could kill. The viceroy wheezed, trying to speak. You don't understand. I am of noble blood." The human commander finally stepped forward, his voice cold, calculated. "We understand perfectly, stand." Then the camera shifted. The view panned away from the viceroy, revealing what lay beyond him. Zivar's breath caught in his throat. It was a Dominion planet, not just any world, one of the core systems. A place the Dominion had never imagined would be threatened. But it was worse than that, because orbiting the planet was a human fleet. Hundreds of ships, more than the Dominion had ever thought possible. And every single one of them was armed, ready, waiting. The meaning was unmistakable. This wasn't just about the battle. This was a message. The Dominion had always treated humanity as an inconvenience, an obstacle to be removed, nothing more. But humanity was sending a response. A response that carried one simple truth. The war was already over. The camera feed returned to the viceroy, who had finally realized the magnitude of the situation. His arrogance crumbled, replaced by sheer, desperate terror. "You can't do this!" he shrieked. This is madness!" "You can't," the human commander tilted his head slightly. "And yet, here we are." Then, with chilling calm, the human fired. A single shot, not at the viceroy, but at the screen. The visual feed cut to black. Silence fell over the Dominion flagship. Zivar felt his own heartbeat thunder in his ears. The entire bridge crew stared at the darkened view screen, too horrified to speak. The humans hadn't made demands. They hadn't asked for surrender. They had simply shown them what was coming. A slow, unstoppable march toward the Dominion's doorstep. Admiral Zivar turned back to the Chancellor. His voice, once filled with authority, was now a hoarse whisper. "What are your orders?" For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, for the first time in Dominion history, a High Chancellor uttered words no one had ever expected. "Stand down." A sharp gasp rippled through the bridge. Officers flinched, their minds struggling to comprehend. "The meaning, Chancellor," Zivar began, but Ruvak cut him off. "We cannot win this war, Admiral. We were never fighting a war to begin with." The Chancellor's voice was hollow. "We were fighting something we do not understand." The Chancellor looked up, his burning eyes meeting Zivar's. This was not a battle. His voice was distant, haunted. This was an introduction. Zivar shuddered, because deep in his soul, he knew it was true. Humanity had never been weak. They had only been waiting. And now, their time had come. For a long time, silence ruled the Dominion command bridge, not the silence of strategy, not the silence of deliberation. This was the silence of fear. Admiral Zivar's mandibles twitched as he stood frozen, staring at the darkened view screen. His mind raced through every scenario, every contingency plan, every military protocol the Dominion had ever devised. But the horrifying realization was clear. None of it mattered. The Dominion was not dealing with a conventional enemy. They had never been at war with humanity. They had simply been playing a game, while humanity had been preparing for extinction. A tremor ran through Zivar's fingers as he turned back to his crew. Every officer in the room, battle-hardened, disciplined, veterans of planetary subjugations, now looked like cornered prey. The comms officer was the first to break the silence. His voice was raw, shaken. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. A direct response from the human flagship." Sci-Var exhaled slowly, forcing his mind to steady itself. "Put it through," he said. The massive view screen flickered, and for the second time that day, the bridge crew of the Dominion's most powerful warship found themselves staring into the void. At the center of the screen stood a human, tall, imposing, clad in sleek black battle armor. Unlike Dominion commanders, who adorned themselves with ceremonial robes and elaborate headdresses to signify rank, this human wore no symbols, no decoration, just armor. Cold, functional, deadly. The helmet obscured their face, but the voice that followed made Zivar's blood run cold. "Admiral Zivar of the Dominion, Chancellor Ruvak of the Supreme Council." It was calm. Too calm. A voice stripped of all arrogance, all pomp, all unnecessary flourish. It was a voice that had already decided the outcome of this encounter. "You've made a mistake," the human continued. "One that has cost your fleet, one that has cost your empire, and one that, if left unchecked, will cost your entire civilization." Zivar clenched his jaw. "What do you want?" There was a pause. Then, the human did something that shattered every preconception the Dominion had about their species. They laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not a mocking one. It was something far, far worse. A laugh filled with pity. "What do we want?" the human repeated. "That's what you still don't understand, Admiral. You think this is about conquest, about resources, about power." The human's head tilted slightly. "But that's not what this is about at all." The screen flickered, just for a moment, but long enough to reveal something that sent an icy chill through every Dominion officer's veins. It was footage, not of the battle, but of the Dominion's past, of Dominion soldiers rounding up civilians on occupied planets, of planetary bombardments turning cities into smoldering ruins, of Dominion overlords stripping entire worlds bare, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Then, the screen shifted. The images of destruction were replaced with something the Dominion had never expected to see: humans, not their armies, not their warships, their survivors. A planet long thought to be a forgotten casualty of the Dominion's expansion now stood displayed for the entire command bridge to see. But it wasn't abandoned. It wasn't destroyed. It had been rebuilt. By humans. By survivors who had clawed their way out of the ashes, who had endured, who had adapted, who had waited. And now, they had returned. The human commander's voice carried over the silence. "You came to our world long ago. You left it burning. You thought you had won." A pause. "You didn't." Zivar staggered back from the view screen. His claws gripped the edge of the console so tightly that the metal groaned under the pressure. This wasn't just a battle. This wasn't even a war. This was retribution. The human's voice dropped lower, just above a whisper, yet it carried more weight than anything that had been spoken before. "You should have finished the job." The screen flickered once more, and then the true horror began. For the first time in Dominion history, their own fleet became the battlefield. The human warships, once silent and motionless, moved, not chaotically, not aggressively, with precision, every motion calculated, every ship moving as if they were one entity. A Dominion warship, one of the last remaining battleships, tried to flee. Its engines ignited, burning bright as it made a desperate attempt to jump into slipspace. The humans didn't fire at it. They didn't need to. Because before the ship could escape, something impossible happened. The human fleet shifted, not through traditional thrusters, not through standard maneuvering tactics. They moved in a way that defied Dominion understanding, as if reality itself was bending around them. One second, the human warships were at a distance. The next, they were there. The Dominion warship never even had time to scream. It was there one moment, gone the next. No explosion, no debris, no wreckage. Just gone. Zivar's breath hitched in his throat. This wasn't technology. This wasn't strategy. This was something else. something the Dominion had never encountered before. Shivar turned back to Chancellor Ruvak, his voice hoarse. "We have to surrender. Now." The Chancellor's 4 eyes were locked onto the view screen, his body frozen in absolute terror. For the first time in Dominion history, a warlord, a conqueror of hundreds of worlds, looked small. "Admiral," the Chancellor's voice was barely a whisper. "This is not a war we can win." A long pause. Then, the human commander spoke one last time. "You were never meant to win." And with those final words, the transmission cut out. The battle was over, but something far greater had just begun. A terrible silence settled over the Dominion command bridge. The kind of silence that comes not from the absence of sound, but from the absence of hope. Admiral Zivar stood motionless, his claws gripping the cold metal of his command console. His mind, trained for war, bred for strategy, could not process what had just happened. The Dominion had always been the superior force. Their fleets had conquered entire star systems in weeks. Their war doctrines had shattered civilizations before they could even mount a proper defense. And yet, in a matter of moments, the humans had broken them. Not just their fleet, not just their military power. They had broken their will. The human commander's voice still echoed in his mind. "You were never meant to win." The realization was suffocating. For all their might, for all their advanced weaponry, for all their military genius, the Dominion was not the predator in this battle. They were the prey, and the humans had just begun the hunt. A dull, mechanical chime cut through the stillness. The emergency beacon from the fleet's tactical core, a system designed to track active warships, was flashing red. One of Zivar's officers hesitated before whispering, "Admiral, we've lost 70% of our fleet." Zivar's mandibles twitched, his throat tightened. "Show me." The central display flickered to life. Before the battle, the Dominion fleet had been a vast, imposing armada. Hundreds of warships arranged in perfect strategic formation. A force so overwhelming that no species in recorded history had ever survived an encounter with them. Now, it was a graveyard. The Dominion ships that remained were little more than shattered husks, drifting lifelessly in the void. Their once pristine hulls were now torn apart, leaking glowing fragments of metal and ruptured energy cores into the abyss. It was not the result of a conventional battle. This was something else, something methodical. The humans hadn't simply destroyed the Dominion ships, they had dismantled them with surgical precision. And as Zivar's gaze traced across the wreckage, he noticed something even more horrifying. The debris wasn't spreading. It was shrinking. No, not shrinking. Disappearing. The Dominion warships that had been lost weren't just destroyed. They had been erased. The weapons the humans wielded were not conventional. Not missiles, not energy beams, not any form of combat the Dominion had ever witnessed. It was as if the humans had found a way to remove their enemies from existence itself. A deep, primal instinct screamed in Zivar's mind. This is not war. This is extinction. The Chancellor of the Supreme Council, Ruvak, had not moved. His 6 fingers clutched at the armrest of his throne-like chair, his reptilian skin now a pale shade of fear. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Admiral, is there any way to negotiate?" Zivar's throat went dry. Negotiate? With them? This wasn't like any other enemy they had faced. Other species could be broken, could be offered terms. The Dominion had spent centuries perfecting the art of warfare, of psychological domination, of ensuring their enemies knew they were defeated. But the humans were not playing that game. They were not here for conquest. They were here to settle a debt, and the Dominion had no currency to pay it with. A new signal pinged across the command interface. Another transmission. From the humans. For a brief moment, Zivar hesitated. The last message had shattered what remained of the Dominion's confidence. Another one? Would it even matter? But he had no choice. "Put it through," he croaked. The view screen came to life. The human commander was gone. In their place, a cold, unfeeling display of numbers filled the screen. A countdown. 1 minute. Shivar's breath caught in his throat. "What is this?" The comms officer checked his readings, his voice shaking. It's It's a slipstream collapse sequence. Sivar's claws curled into a tight fist. He knew what that meant. The humans had sealed the sector. Slipspace, the backbone of all interstellar travel, was collapsing around them. If they didn't escape within the next 60 seconds, the entire Dominion fleet would be trapped in this sector forever. Their fate would not be death. It would be exile. They would be left drifting in the void, cut off from reinforcements, cut off from their empire. And the worst part? The humans hadn't even fired another shot. They were letting the Dominion choose their fate, stay and be forgotten, or flee and carry the story of their defeat back to their empire. Ruvok's voice trembled. Zivar. We have to retreat. The Admiral's claws dug into his palm. His entire body shook with shame, with rage, with humiliation. This was supposed to be the greatest conquest in Dominion history. Instead, it would be remembered as their greatest failure. Shivar turned back to his crew. His voice was bitter, heavy with defeat. All ships, retreat. The few remaining Dominion warships immediately powered their slipstream drives. The countdown ticked. Lower. 30 seconds. 15. 5. And then, the Dominion was gone. The remnants of their once great fleet vanished into the void, retreating into the depths of their own empire. And the humans? They didn't pursue. They simply watched, silent, unmoving, like predators who had allowed their prey to escape. But as the last Dominion warship faded into the abyss, one final transmission was sent. Not to the Dominion, not to any government, but to the entire galaxy. A message, clear, unmistakable, undeniable, a warning. This is what happens when you challenge humanity. And as that message echoed across the stars, one undeniable truth settled over every species in the known universe. The humans had returned, and this time, they were not here to lose. Final words and call to action. The Dominion thought they were invincible. They thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated humanity. Now the entire galaxy knows the truth. Earth does not forgive. Earth does not forget. What would happen if this war escalated? If humanity decided that mere survival was not enough? Let us know in the comments below. Do you think the Dominion will ever recover from this defeat? Or has the balance of power forever shifted? Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. And remember, never underestimate humanity.